Welcome back to Boss Economics World, folks, where we unmask the chaotic clown show of global economics with one simple premise, uncomfortable truths delivered straight to your screen. Buckle up, because today we're diving into the madcap spectacle that is Argentina, where a madman is actually saving the sinking ship. And yes, before you ask, today's madman in question is none other than Javier Milei, Argentina's self-proclaimed libertarian powerhouse who swaggers across the global stage proudly wearing the nickname El Loco. But listen, there's a thin line between insanity and genius, and Milei's results so far. Well, let's just say they're tipping the scales towards something closer to financial genius. Or, at the very least, a competent madman steering Argentina toward a rare economic comeback. But come on, folks, isn't that what we need? A little insanity to undo the insanity of decades of absurd government mismanagement. We'll get to the juicy IMF negotiations, his bromance with Trump, and how the hell this guy is keeping working-class Argentines by his side despite gutting government programs. That's all coming up. So stay with me. Let's take a step back. Argentina has been a poster child for economic dysfunction. You want a brief history lesson? Here it is, soaring inflation, a currency worth its weight in monopoly money, and debt defaults for breakfast. I mean, Argentina's had more economic meltdowns than a toddler denied candy. The hardest part? Finding a fixer brave, or mad, enough to step in and clean up this mess. Enter Javier Milei, part libertarian hawk, part economic daredevil. A guy who, just a year ago, was shaking up Davos, telling the world the Western world is in danger and heralding deep austerity as the magic bullet for Argentina's woes. You heard him right, austerity in a country where the government practically burns pesos to heat their homes. Well, guess what? A year later, and look at what Milei's shock therapy has done. Monthly inflation sliced down to below 3% from a ludicrous 20% jump. Budget cuts. Brutal but effective, with the first annual budget surplus since 2009, people. 2009. That's 14 years of deficit spending wiped out in Milei's first year. And the economy? Already climbing out of the pit of recession it dropped into after his dramatic devaluation of the peso and fiscal belt-tightening. Listen, Milei's critics were foaming at the mouth when he slammed the brakes on government spending. Gutting programs, slashing subsidies, firing up inflation in the short term, it sounded like a textbook recipe for collapse. But instead, call it what you want to, control-freak economics, Milei seems to have turned Argentina from a foreclosed disaster zone into an emerging poster child of fiscal discipline, albeit a brutal one. Graham Stock from Blue Bay Asset Management, one of those folks whose job is to be skeptical, said it best. The key to Milei's plan is a simple, brutal principle: balance the budget. All else follows. No bloated welfare state or state-run cash guzzlers. And that's what kept the IMF hanging on the potential for future aid. Stocks are rallying, bonds have skyrocketed by 100%, and guess what? Argentina, one of the largest original emerging markets debtors, is outpacing all other markets. What does this tell you? Well, we know markets don't buy crazy. What they see is a commitment to fiscal discipline, at least in the short term. Now listen up closely, here's the punchline even Milei didn't see coming: working-class Argentines like Laura Velasquez are sticking with him too. This is a 19-year-old t-shirt vendor who works at a Buenos Aires fast food joint scraping dollars on the side. She got hit square in the face by inflation surges when Milei let the peso tank. And when he said adios to subsidies, her family felt the squeeze. Yet here we are, everything feels calm now for people like her. The wild fluctuations that ripped through the Argentine economy have stabilized, shelving years of uncertainty. Laura holds up a vote for Milei, not because she loves austerity, but because life under less government control feels more predictable, more livable. Did you hear that? Life with less government feels more predictable in Argentina. That's like a smoker saying they can finally breathe after quitting cold turkey. It's painful at first, but in the long run, the air's just better. You following me here? Let's cut away the carnival of political fanfare and hone in on the data. Milei's big challenge is still looming: currency and inflation control. You see, starting this February 1st, the peso is pegged for a controlled depreciation of 1% per month, a glacial pace in a country with legacy triple-digit inflation that once hit north of 100% annually. The trickiest part? He's trying to free up Argentina's strangling capital controls without letting the peso backslide into full spiral mode. He needs hard cash reserves, meaning he's essentially praying that the International Monetary Fund, IMF, rescues him yet again. But this isn't Argentina's first day at the IMF casino. 22 bailout programs have failed before. So why should the 23rd gamble pay off? Keep in mind, Argentina still owes the IMF a cool $44 billion from the last bailout package. The Washington lenders have every reason to look at Milei and say, how do we know you're not just going to burn this loan to prop up your peso, only to come knocking at our door again in a year? But the risk-taker that he is, Milei is placing some long-range bets. If this budget wizardry holds up, he's banking on convincing the IMF to keep lending, bolstered by his budding bromance with a certain Donald Trump, the United States' 45th, and now 47th, president and no stranger to deranged economic mantras of his own. Don't underestimate this alliance. The US controls about 17% of the voting power at the IMF. If Milei smooth talks Trump, we could be witnessing a diplomatic backchannel where Milei pawns in some fiscal discipline cred to bargain for those vital reserves. That, or we're in for another economic crash. Either way, people are watching every move this administration makes. Alright, plot twist. Let's say Milei fumbles the delicately choreographed exit from capital controls, a bump in the road sees companies dump the peso as fast as they can, and boom, inflation's back. Remember Donald Trump's infamous art of the deal? Well, Milei may be writing his own sequel as he negotiates restraint, trying not to undo what little economic goodwill has been built up. There's no forgiveness from hyperinflation. It'll rear its ugly head like a vampire if even one government miscalculation is made. My point? The IMF deal and currency control plan are tightrope acts with a devilish wind barreling down on Milei from all sides. Imagine this scenario: currency plummets, inflation rockets back, and Milei suddenly needs to dole out cash to control unrest. That's an election year crisis that could crush his 47% approval rating, which, by the way, is higher now than when he took office. Keep your eyes peeled for the midterm elections this October. Milei simply cannot afford a misstep between now and then. The real puzzle of Milei's presidency is convincing everyday Argentines to swallow a bitter austerity pill while singing his praises. Popular support for deep budget cuts and belt-tightening measures in a country where 3 debt defaults happened this century alone. How? And here's the kicker: this support base isn't a fluke. It's growing. Working-class people, the ones typically left at the mercy of inflation and state welfare, or lack thereof, are rallying behind budget cuts because, brace yourself, they'd rather see calmer prices than over-reliance on subsidies. Maria Velasquez is struggling with high prices, sure, but her optimism for Milei's ability to stabilize Argentina remains intact. If Milei can shift the public's mindset from government dependency to personal resilience, then austerity populism could be his lasting legacy. We might actually be seeing a new model for fiscal politics in a country that frankly laughed at the idea of balanced budgets. Is he? Let me tell you, only a madman would attempt to fix Argentina with the kind of daring economic stunts that come right off the libertarian wish list. But if he keeps pulling victories out of thin air, well, the West might have more than just a madman to reckon with. We could be facing a new gold standard for austerity populism in the modern age. As a wise commentator once said, it's not madness if it works. Fast forward to 2026, and we might just see Milei strolling into Davos again, but this time, not as an underdog, but as a conqueror. Pragmatic fiscal restraint never seemed so chaotic and yet, strangely liberating. That's all for today, folks. Keep your eye on Boss Economics World, because if the powers that be can't contain their disaster, rest assured we'll be calling out their follies. Until next time, get ready for a little madness in the name of economics.